Oh, hello everybody. Eddie here. Um, I just want to welcome you to um, the current session where we are going to discuss about the um, research topics in management, and it is actually related to the the assessments that we need to address. Now, I believe you have gone through the assessment brief and also the assessment advice. And I also have uploaded the presentation of the assessment advice. Okay? Just again, briefly, the instructions include these aspects here, like the research methodology, and also the organizational theory, okay, uh, including the comparisons with the alternative theory, okay, and the utilization of the appropriate research strategies, okay, and ethical aspects, and the legitimacy of the management function, and the political and social environment, as well as the um, qualitative analysis. Okay, so there is a focus on the qualitative research here, and that's one that I would like to discuss in this session. Okay, and definitely we need to incorporate the use of high quality external sources. Okay, so what do you mean by high quality external sources? They are credible. For instance, you can refer to the academic journal from the EBSCO host, for instance, okay, research the library, and you can also research the industry data, such as the ABIS work report, for instance, okay. And again, we recommend you to select an organization that you plan to focus on. This could be the organization that you work for or used to work for, okay. Introduce this organization, introduce the industry that the organization competes, and outline the literature review. Okay, you can look at the organizational theory as the instructions also mentioned, files theory, social theory, and so on and so forth. In the previous sessions, we discussed about a range of management related theories and also social theory. Okay, and when you address that, make sure that you consider a range of theories, not only one, okay, or two. Okay, so a range of theories that are related to help you building on your thoughts. Okay, and based on the theoretical framework, okay, outline research questions. Um, Outline the research questions, okay, consider the legitimacy, politics, and social environment and ethics, okay, and explain the research methods, collected data. Here we talk about the case study method, which is basically part of the qualitative research methods, okay, and explain the key findings. That's basically it, okay, and there are a few notes that I also make, okay. All right. So now let's have a look at this topic today, and please make sure that you access the learning material from the Dropbox folder that I posted some time ago in the announcement board. Okay. So today's topic is basically research. Okay, as we briefly discussed, I deliberately talk about the assessments to show you the strong connection as well with this topic. Okay, right. So, well, what do you mean by research? Well, it is simply a systematic process to reveal the insights. Okay, now we actually also conduct research because we want to address the problems. Okay. In the context of business research, we start with the business problem. Now here, we also highlight to you that we need to be able to convert the business problem into research problems, okay? The business problem could be from business management or marketing research, for instance. They could be the sales, we can't achieve the sales, for instance, okay? Of course, when you talk about broader management problems, that could also be the employee engagement, for instance, not that good, for instance, okay, part of the research, okay? Or we can also research the competitive advantage of the company, for instance, from the broader management perspective, okay? Right, so now this is a simple snapshot in terms of research process, okay, which is pretty much straightforward. I guess we start with the problem. Okay, we always start with problem because we conduct research since we want to address certain problem. Okay, so we may start with the business problem, management problem, then we convert that problem into a research problem or research question. Okay, and following that, we develop the research plan for us to collect the information, the data that is meaningful for us, okay, to address the problem. And after that, we implement it, okay, we implement the research plan. Here, we collect the data, we analyze the data, we slice and dice the data to get some insights, okay? And the last stage is actually to interpret and report the findings, okay? When we interpret and report the findings, essentially it is related back to the problem that we outlined, okay? Because we want to get the answer, okay? Why do we conduct research? In business, we conduct research because we don't have the information to answer the question, okay? Therefore, we conduct research, not because we have the budget to conduct the research, okay? Not because we have budgeted the some amount of money for us to conduct research so that we conduct research, but because we want to get the answer. We don't have the information, okay? As an organization, we need to keep learning, okay? We need to keep improving our knowledge, okay? And at some point of time, we may not have the knowledge to answer certain problems, certain business or management problems. That's when we conduct research, okay? Therefore, part of the defining problem, actually, we need to ensure that we understand the specific problem, okay? All right. The other thing I'd like to highlight is in terms of defining the problem, we actually, in my experience, it is probably the largest, it is probably taking the largest amount of my time when it comes to conducting research, okay? Yeah, you may argue that does it mean we don't understand the problem? Well, we have a feeling about the problem because it starts with the business issues, okay? But then specifying the problem and also converting the problem into a research problem is another thing, okay? That is also a challenge where we need to slice and dice some secondary data first before we can we commence the research, okay? Okay, so in terms of defining the problem and research objectives, we have several types, three types of research. The first one is the exploratory research, where it helps us define the problem. It suggests further research, okay? Now, from research techniques perspective, normally we apply the qualitative research to help us exploring the problem, okay? Now, from management research perspective, the qualitative research actually also helps us to build the theory or the theoretical framework, okay, for further research, okay? And descriptive research is the second approach, the second objective that we may have, the second purpose that we may have, which is basically about describing the issues. Okay, so we want to describe the issues further because we have a little knowledge from the qualitative research, and then we want to describe that further. Okay, and the last one is the causal research, where here we actually try to find the answer of certain issues. Okay, or in other words, we try to look at the cause and effect relationships. Okay, where we look at, we test hypotheses, we use a certain statistical model, okay? At the high level of modeling, we may use the structural equation modeling, for instance, from quantitative research perspective, okay? in regards to the descriptive research, again, we also use the quantitative research. But for the causal research, we may need to adopt certain statistical tools to help us explaining one variable, or how one variable or certain variables are affected by the other variables. I have to say affected in quote and quote, okay? Because from statistic perspective, we actually say that we show the relationship, and when we show the relationship, it may not be about A affecting B, but we admit the relationship between the two, right? All right. Now, and then we come to the research plan, basically, okay? When it comes to research plan, we actually need to make a decision about the types of data that we need to collect, okay? So there are two types of data. The first one is the secondary data, and the second one is the primary data. I put the secondary data first because that is the one that I would like to recommend you to investigate before you investigate the primary data. The reason for that is the secondary data helps us to tighten the research questions further before we push the button to conduct the primary data, okay, to research the primary data, okay. The other reason, which is also related to it, is the primary data is normally more expensive than the secondary data, okay. All right. Now, from research technique perspective, we have qualitative and quantitative. Okay, the qualitative research includes a small number of individuals. Okay, for instance, the focus group discussion, in-depth interview, and observation. Okay, and the outcomes would be presented in the format of words or the opinions of the respondents. Okay. And now the question is, how small is small? Okay, what do we mean by small here? Okay, well, for focus group discussion, we normally invite 6 to 10 people in one focus group meeting. Okay, in the case of in-depth interview, we normally organize a one-to-one interview. Okay, but the key point in qualitative study is basically to help us. This technique allows us to explore the problem so that we can probe the problem further, right, for our understanding. Okay. Therefore, we normally use open-ended questions, not closed-ended questions. Yeah, a little bit of closed-ended questions sometimes are also used in that focus group discussion, for instance. Okay, but pretty much it allows the researchers to probe the issues further. Okay. Now, quantitative normally includes a lot of people. Okay. How many is many, or what do you mean by a lot? Well, from statistic perspective, we normally say that more than 25, we say it is a lot. Potentially, since we also need to look at to use certain statistical tool, some companies have the standard of using more than 100 people. Okay, while in the case of qualitative, if you conduct the in-depth interview or one-to-one interview, you may look at 5 interviews or 10 interviews, for instance, and certain techniques requires us to have 25 interviews, for instance, certain certain qualitative approach. Okay, all right. The specific quantitative technique that is quite popular is survey, where we use the questionnaire. Okay, and we can also spread the questionnaire through emails or any other internet or online tools, right? Aside from face-to-face or mail contact. Okay, and the outcome would be in the format of statistics or percentage or any numeracy figures. Okay, sometimes we also show the correlations coefficient of one variable to the other variable, for instance. Okay, or any other statistical tools. Okay. Right. Just This is just to show you briefly about the secondary data. I'm not going to discuss this. Um, I'm not going to discuss this further, okay? But broadly speaking, we have two types of the secondary data, internal and external, okay? So internal includes the company, anything that company produces, and external includes the government database, such as the ABS, okay? The IBIS World Report, for instance, this is the one that I'd like to recommend you to research, as the university subscribe to it, and you can get the help from the librarian, okay? Periodical journals, periodicals, and books, for instance, there are some other sources, okay? Right, now primary data collection. Okay, we have the observational research where we observe the um, participants, the research participants or the respondents in their natural environments. Okay, we observe the behavior, we observe how they um, uh, um, perform certain activities. Okay, and in the context of survey, we actually use that for to gather the descriptive information. And in terms of experimental research, we normally conduct that to test the causal information. Okay, so we conduct the experiment. Okay, we normally apply the control group in our experimental research. Okay, right. So there are the primary data collection. Okay, now let's look at the qualitative research, which is basically the main course in your assessments. Okay, this is what scholars suggest in terms of qualitative research. Okay, situated activity that locates the observer in the world. Okay, so we have the observer, in this instance us, if we observe certain groups, okay, and it consists of a set of interpretive material practices that make the world visible. Okay, so we need to be able to provide the interpretation of what we observe, right? So that's a simple definition, I guess, in terms of qualitative research. Okay. In other words, it is it generates the data in the format of words, basically. Okay. Now, the other definition, which is probably a bit more that offers us more help in terms of understanding the context of the methodology, the context of research approach, the context of research design, basically suggests that qualitative research begins with assumptions and the use of interpretive or theoretical frameworks that inform the study of research problems, addressing the meaning individuals or groups ascribe to social or human problems. Okay, so that's so we start with the assumptions. Okay, we look at the framework, theoretical framework. Okay, that's these two pieces of information, the assumptions and the theoretical framework, actually inform what the study or what we try to address. Okay, when it comes to human or social problems. Okay, right. Now, actually, if you look at number of studies, there are people populating how many approaches that we can use when it comes to qualitative research. Okay, the highest numbers of the highest number of approaches that I can find so far is 28 approaches. So there are experts populated 28 approaches when it comes to qualitative research. Okay, and based on that, Creswell and Poth actually have narrowed down to 5 major ones. Okay, so out of these 28 approaches, okay, across disciplines such as medicine, social science, psychology, education, business management, and so on and so forth. Okay, These two scholars, Creswell and Foss, have narrowed down to 5 major ones, okay, that include narrative research, phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, and case study. Okay, so the last one here is of our interest actually in addressing this assessment. Okay, all right. So before we discuss that, remember it contains the philosophical assumptions. Okay, now these include the philosophical assumptions actually include these 4 aspects. The ontological, for instance. Okay, the ontological is actually asking about the nature of reality. Okay, and the next one is epistemological. Okay, this is where we ask about what counts as reality. What is the reality in here? What do we mean by reality in here? Okay, and the researchers actually try to get as close as possible to the participants being studied. Okay, and the next one is axiological, where we actually ask the role of the researcher's values, right? And the last one is methodological. What is the process of research? Okay. Now, these philosophical assumptions affect the way we design, or in other words, actually, they affect our research design. Okay. Remember, especially when we learn social science, okay, our lab is actually quite huge. It's the social actors, right? Our lab actually includes the social actors, right? The social system, for instance, right? As we discussed in the couple sessions ago, okay, when it comes to social theory, okay, and also management theory, okay. Therefore, think about our assumptions actually drive what kind of research design that we need to adopt, okay, and we can also think about, let's say, if we are a group of blind people, okay, and we try to define an elephant, okay, we have an elephant in the room, okay, someone who touches the leg of the elephant may have a different definition about the elephant, okay. Someone who touches the ears, for instance, may have a different definition of the ear of the elephant, okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that helps us to understand actually. So in other words, these philosophical assumptions actually help us to understand what we are going, how we design the research. Okay, how to generate certain data. Okay, therefore we can clearly set the boundaries as well to explain to the readers and also expect what kind of findings that we can present. Okay, right. Now let's have a look at these research, these qualitative research. Okay, approaches. We have narrative research, which is basically rooted in a different social and humanities discipline. Okay, so it is based on social studies and human studies, basically. Okay, and the narrative research, as the name suggests, begins with the experiences as expressed in lived and told stories of individuals. Okay, therefore the researchers actually collect the stories from individuals. Okay, so we get the stories, okay, from the individuals. Okay, now the focus is not only valorizing individuals' experience, but it's also about an exploration of the social, cultural, familial, linguistic, and institutional narratives within the individual's experiences. Okay, where they constitute and shape, express, and also enact in their real life in the social system. Okay, so it's not only about getting their experience, but we try to portray those experiences in narrative research into to construct our understanding about the institutions where these individuals operate, for instance, okay, and social system where the individuals operate, or social values, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's narrative research. Okay, the second one is phenomenological research. Okay, Now, if the narrative study actually focus on the stories of the experiences of the single individual or several individuals, the phenomenological study actually describes the common meaning. Okay, so if we interview several people, okay, we try to find the common themes among these several individuals. Okay, so that's what we say as a phenomenon. Okay, now the phenomenologists actually focus on this describing the what all participants have in common. So we focus more on what do they have in common. Okay, what they have in common as they experience a phenomenon. Okay, um, and the next one is the grounded theory, which is also quite popular. Okay, and if we trace back to the previous two approaches, we say that the narrative research focuses on individual stories, okay, told by the participants, and the phenomenology emphasize the common theme, the common meaning, okay, for a number of individuals. Okay, we look at the shared meaning, basically, or the common themes that they talk differently. Okay, the grounded theory is actually to move beyond description and to generate or discover a theory or a unified theoretical explanation for process or an action. Okay. Now here we say that the participants in the study would all have experienced the process. Okay, they have the experience. Okay, the participants have got the experience. The respondents have got the experience. Okay, in terms of the process and the development of the theory. Okay, and that helps us to explain the practice or provide a framework for further research. Okay, so the theory development is actually grounded in the data from participants who have experienced the process. So that's the difference between the three of them, where the ground theory is more into is aimed at generating or discovering a theory, okay, or a unified theoretical explanation. Okay, so based on the individuals or the participants' explanation to us. Okay, so we look at the connection between one thing and the other thing, and we create the theory. Okay, and and that is the aim of the grounded theory. Okay? Now, the ethnographic research, which is quite common in anthropology study, um, whilst the ground theory researcher develops a theory from examining many individuals who share in the same process, action, or interaction. The study, this study are not likely to be located in the same place or interacting on a frequent basis. So that's they develop a shared pattern of behavior, belief, and language. Now, ethnography is different. Ethnography is interested in examining these shared patterns. Okay, therefore, the unit of analysis is typically larger than 20 or so individuals involved in a grounded theory study. Okay, therefore, the ethnography focuses on an entire culture and sharing group. Okay, so that's the main focus of the ethnographic research. Okay? All right, so now we come to the case study research, where the entire culture sharing group in the ethnography study may be considered a case, but the intention in the ethnography study is to determine how the culture works. Okay, now the focus is not to develop an in-depth understanding of a single case. It is not to explore um, an issue or problem using the case as a specific illustration. Okay, so the case study research actually involves the study of a case or cases within a real life or contemporary context or setting, as Robert Kayin also discussed. Okay, remember Robert Kayin's case study approach is the one that we need to refer to. Okay, and this case may be a concrete entity such as an individual or a small group, an organization or partnership, at less concrete level, it may be a community a relationship, okay, or a division, if you like, or a decision process or specific project. Okay, so therefore, based on this, if we refer to your assessment, I would recommend you to specify the unit of study. Are you going to talk about the individual or small group or the organization? Okay, then you decide the number of participants. Okay, that reflects the key aspects of this unit of study. Okay, right. So that's basically the research approaches. Okay, and again, just a brief summary. Research is intended to reveal the insights. In doing so, we develop a research design that is affected by the philosophical assumptions. And these are the 5 popular qualitative approaches that we just discussed briefly. Okay, right. That's basically a research topic, guys, and all the best for your assessment.